The world can seem upside down at times, which has set me on a journey in search for love, truth, and ultimately personal freedom. I'm on a mission to help people find peace and healing so that each of us as individuals and ultimately the collective can be free from whatever keeps us stuck and skews our view of just how beautiful this life can be. Welcome to the Lucas Mack Show. Hello, brothers and sisters, and welcome back to another episode of the Lucas Mack Show. I am Lucas Mack. Thank you for joining. This episode with David Sun Todd is really cool. He shares his journey, his spiritual path, and what he's doing right now is helping many people step out of the matrix, reclaim sovereignty, and heal so that they can truly find peace and be out of this matrix system. We talk about a lot. We talk about artificial intelligence. We talk about different spiritual paths and ultimately how we can reclaim sovereignty in our own life. It's a very beautiful episode. David, I'm really honored that you came on, and thank you for all that you're doing, and everyone enjoy. Well, everyone, like I said, it's so nice to get referred guests on this podcast. And John Paul Rice introduced this beautiful soul, and I'm excited to have David Sun Todd on. I think this is going to be a really fun conversation and exploration on this. So, David, thanks for joining the podcast.
I'm glad to be here, Lucas. Nice to meet you. Nice to connect with your audience and dive into a conversation.
Yeah, it's so needed. Before we started recording, I asked you how you got into this space, and I think it's fascinating. As I ask everyone their journey, there's always a base, and then there's a leaving of that. And if you don't mind just sharing your story of how you got into the work you're doing today.
Yeah, sure. Well, as I said to you, I grew up near where you are, near Dallas, in the 50s. I was born in 52. And the first third of my life, I was part of a very normal middle-class family, going to Methodist church. And then I grew up, kind of came of age in the 60s. And once the counterculture started to take off, I was just getting into high school. And I was like, this is for me. Most of my friends, not so much, but for me, it was like, yeah. And so I started taking psychedelic drugs, and it just opened me up to this whole inner world of mystical experience. And there was something about, experiencing the divine rather than just believing in the divine that really touched my heart. And I said, this is for me. And in those days, the story was, if you like what you experience on psychedelics, then you should meditate, and you could feel that way all the time, right? So I got into yoga meditation, had a guru that was Indian. After a few years of that, I found another teacher who was American, still kind of based in the Indian path, but much more relatable for me as a Westerner. And I was, very devoted in that path for about 20 years and studied all the traditions, shamanism, enlightenment, yoga, meditation of every kind. And, I grew a lot spiritually in that work. There's no doubt about it. But at a certain point, after about 15 years, it felt like, okay, maybe I've gotten everything from this that I'm going to get. And as many people found during that time, the community and the teaching and the whole path started to get kind of cultic and a little bit dark. And so there was this kind of cognitive dissonance, like, well, I like this part, but this part is kind of strange, and I'm not sure it really works for me anymore. So I connected with a woman that I knew. We started a relationship. Her name was Bonnie Bell. And once we got together, it's like, we're going to go on a new path. We don't know what it is, but we're going to move on. And we did. And part of what that led us to was doing inner healing work. We connected to this healer. I'd been sick for like 7 years and I tried everything. And this friend said, "Have you tried psychic healing?" And
Mm.
I'm like, "No." But I went to see this guy and, he just was very gentle and direct and was tuning into angels who were guiding him to understand things that had happened in my past that were affecting me and
Mm.
affecting my physical health. So I'm going, okay, this seems interesting. And so he would do this work and do these energy releases, and I would feel different. I would feel, wow, I'm on this is something that I want to keep pursuing.
Mm.
So we learned how to do some of that work, began to work with our own guidance, began to do healing work for each other and for other people. And just, kind of shifting from an outer authority to the inner authority was a big, big change.
Yeah.
And the other change that we went through was really we moved out into this beautiful property, 20 minutes up a dirt road, 40 acres surrounded by 5,000 acres of undeveloped land in Northern California.
Mm.
And just like we just got immersed in nature in a really direct way. I had left a software business that I had been a partner in. We had some money in the bank, and we just threw ourselves into exploring the land and the energy of the place, doing our healing work there. And it was a very powerful place. People would come there and visit us and go, "Gee, this doesn't feel like the earth here."
Mm.
There's something alive in this land that we could feel and that had drawn us there. And very spontaneously, we just began to create art from the land. Bonnie was starting to create some collage art, and I was taking photographs of every rock and tree and flower and, feather that we found in the property. And somehow I had got an early version of Photoshop and got a scanner and scanned my photos into the scanner. This was film, back in the day. And we started making these geometric images out of the photographs of rocks and plants from the property. And we knew that there was powerful energy in the land, very healing energy in the land. And so we started creating these images, and then we would show them to our friends, and our friends would go, "Gee, that's a very powerful image. I'm feeling, that the image itself is radiating a kind of energy that is making me feel open or stoned or balanced, or it feels healing." So we began to understand that we were actually developing a kind of nature-based,
Mm.
art-based healing technology. And it was a way of kind of translating the inner healing work that we were doing into a medium that we could share with other people.
Mm.
And so we're creating this art, and a friend's looking at it and going, "This is fantastic. I'm going to connect you to a friend who might want to invest in this. Maybe it's a business." He took us to a publisher. We showed him some images, and the publisher said, "I've been waiting for someone like this. I love your art. I
Wow.
want to publish what you do." So we created a visionary art deck, right? A kind of a tarot kind of deck. We did a book, we did calendars, and for the next 15 years, we steadily published note cards and calendars and
Wow.
under the name of healing mandalas, right? So it's a way of creating a healing technology from the earth that anybody could relate to.
Mm.
It's not no religious connotation. It's just good energy from nature that has a healing effect on
Mm.
our systems and on our souls.
Mm.
So journey continued. We ended up moving to Florida to take care of Bonnie's mother. While we lived on that property, Bonnie went through a very dramatic, even miraculous healing from breast cancer.
Mm.
She had no chemotherapy or radiation, or she's healed from stage 4 breast cancer in 9 months. And part of that was because she was working with the spiritual wounds in herself
Mm.
that had come out of our community and even other lifetimes. So she knew that there were deeper levels of her illness that she needed to address. And by the time she went to see a doctor, that cancer was pretty advanced, and they said, "Gee, wish you'd come sooner." But 6 months later, 9 months later, they declared her cancer free. So that really showed us the power of what we were connecting with and what we were working with.
Mm.
And so we moved to Florida, take care of her mom, created a lot of new art from Florida, lots of flowers and butterflies and oceanscapes there. And then we ended up moving to Ashland, Oregon, where I live now. But Bonnie's cancer had come back. She ended up passing away in 2016.
Mm.
And that was a big change for me. You know, we weren't just, uh, we were spiritual partners, business partners, artistic partners. We created all the art together. But I still connected with her after she died. You know, I could still feel her presence and her guidance. And I began to understand that I should take all the mandalas that we had created and create a real healing system out of them. And
Mm.
that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years, building this very mm, systematic way of working through every kind of healing issue that I found in me and my clients in the world.
Mm.
And now I'm starting to teach about that system and share it with other people.
Mm.
The other thing I've done recently, and you're aware of this, I started a Substack about 4 months ago called Planet Evolution. And what I'm exploring on that Substack is what I call the planetary system of control or the matrix control system. You know, I think during the pandemic, we have more and more people are waking up to the fact that things are not right on planet Earth, right? That there are forces at play in our world that do not support our evolution, that
Right.
are anti-life, that are anti-spirit,
Right.
and that it's up to us to liberate ourselves from those forces and literally dismantle the matrix. That's what I talk about in my Substack. So I've been working with some people recently doing a program, teaching them how to work with the tools to liberate themselves from the matrix. But I also have been working for many years with people doing kind of global healing work to help humanity as a whole
Mm.
evolve and get free.
Mm. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Candice, first of all, thank you for sharing that. There's so many things I want to jump in. I will just share that I've been traveling the world quite a bit the past year, and even previously from the job that I have right now, worked internationally. And one thing is incredibly true is that people are beautiful.
Hmm.
Humanity is beautiful.
Right.
Doesn't matter if it was in Thailand, I was in Northeast Thailand, so far outside of I mean, the most rural farmlands, and these people are beautiful. And I've been in
Hmm.
India and the chaos of Delhi and the utter illogical way of living, and yet the beautiful surrender, and no one was angry. And it was like people were beautiful, been,
Yeah.
all over the world. And one thing is so clear, and I came back actually this past week, and I was asked by coworkers, what did I learn? What was it like? And it was more from a business perspective, but I shared that people are beautiful, and we are
Hmm.
not our governments.
Right.
We are not our religions.
Right.
We are not our institutions. We are a collective of beautiful souls traversing this existence. And I often share that, there's a saying that fences make good neighbors,
Hmm.
which is true. However, fences don't keep us from breaking into our neighbor's house or
Right.
stealing their stuff. There's something good inside humanity, and the forces that live off our demise
Yeah.
have done everything they can to keep us from remembering that. And I just
That's
love
right.
that you've been on this journey for 60 years,
Yeah.
learning for yourself, but also now sharing this. So thank you. I really want to say thank you. And thank you to Bonnie
Yeah.
for her
Yeah.
blessings in this journey as well.
That's right. Thank you. Well, I think you make a really good point. You know, part of waking up, I believe, when I was younger, it was about a spiritual awakening, awakening to the divine, yes. but there's a waking up to reality on the planet, right? And we've been conditioned to believe that human beings are evil and that things are bad because that's the best we can do, and it's
Right.
always been this way, it's always going to be this way. And that really is a kind of mind control program,
It's,
right? Coming from non-human forces and intelligences.
yeah.
And we've been fallen into that spell so that we don't see what exactly what you're talking about, which is the true, divine nature of humanity.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and what we've been directed to do is kind of, oh, they're the bad people, this divide and conquer program where we do try to blame our problems on other people without seeing that, no, there are other forces interfering with humanity
Yes.
and life on Earth.
Yes.
And that's where the real, you know, challenge is coming from.
Yeah, that's
It's
right.
really humanity against what is non-human, not people against people.
That's and that alone is such a paradigm shift for
It really is.
in Christianity. If you grow
Yeah.
up in actually any of the five religions,
Yeah.
say there is this idea of the human nature, the self, and its antithesis to
Right.
presence and peace, but it's really something that gets in there. And I think what you're doing is so beautiful. And, my heart is to see humanity heal because the trauma is how it's inserted there. It's like
Hmm.
the portal for the virus to enter.
It absolutely is.
Yeah, yeah,
When I talk to people, I try to paint this picture of the two reasons that human life is not everything we want it to be is trauma, but it's also interference or the interference from these forces. And there's a relationship between the two. I think that much of the trauma that we've experienced on the planet has been initiated through these forces. And the more traumatized we are, the more willing we are to give our power away to authorities that do not have our best interest in mind
right,
and be controlled.
right.
So even at the personal level, when I work with people, I help them get free of what I see as interference in their energy field. But you've also got to heal the trauma that, as you said, is kind of the doorway that lets that interference come in. And we can't really be free and healed until we deal with both of those.
Hmm. It's interesting that you came from Christianity that's specifically you say Methodism and or
Yeah.
just United Methodist Church and I come from that background as well and the answer in the Christian world is this three-letter word sin and it's like
Hmm.
well it's the sin and that is the
Yeah.
gateway and the portal and it puts an indictment on the individual without first understanding what well without first understanding that all I think any human wants to do is feel good.
Right.
How they choose to feel good, it might be the person that hurts another person and they're trying
Yeah.
to find what it, and I believe it's that inner child trying to find the power that was taken from them from their perpetrator and
Right.
trying to touch that innocence, but not knowing they consciously perpetuate it. And I was in Amsterdam in September and I had never been, and I'd hear the red light district and in Christianity, why I Keith Green, this prolific musician and um, wrote all these prolific songs, but he joined YWAM and I had read his book. And his book, they talk about YWAM started this, which is Youth with a Mission, started this like ministry in the red light district. So I've always been fascinated with this red light district. It's obviously infamous and world famous, but I went there and I stood for 2 hours on a corner and I watched it. I don't know if you've ever been, but it is unbelievably bizarre where
Hmm.
there's no delineation between you're walking in downtown Amsterdam and then all of a sudden you enter. So there's grandparents with children, there's tourists,
Right.
and there's just door of all these women in lingerie selling services. And I was fascinated by it. And I never saw anyone enter, but I did see one person exit. But I stood on a corner for 2 hours and I just watched and I just observed.
Mhm.
And I thought, I came to the conclusion that at the end of the day, people just want to feel good.
Right.
How they choose that feeling, where they seek it out, that's where the debate of what's the most
Right.
healthy way to do it. But there's
Right.
this almost innocence inside humanity. And these
Hmm.
women are having a service to help people feel good
Right.
and vice versa. And it's just bizarre. And but I guess coming back to your point, it's interesting where we've both left this paradigm of sin
Hmm.
and inherently evil,
Right.
broken from the get-go to
Yes. Yes.
wait a minute.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
not that's not true. That's a program.
Well, I totally agree with what you're saying. And what happened for me was I went from the Christian church and that idea of sin to Eastern religion, where the evil part of humanity is the ego, right? Another three-letter word.
Yeah, yeah.
And in both of those paradigms, there's something wrong with us from the get-go, and we need some divine intervention from a figure who is outside of us, whether it's a savior or a guru.
Yes.
They're the only ones that can relieve us of this negative thing that's inherent in us.
Right.
And it's a compelling argument. It's kind of hard to argue with sometimes, but I came to understand that no, there is another force alive on the planet. Call it evil, call it demonic, call it whatever,
Yes.
and that it really is, it's the force that takes us out of being soulful human beings.
Yes.
It isn't part of who we are. I actually literally got the message one time. What I was trying to fight as the ego for 20 years and trying to get rid of my ego in a spiritual community really wasn't part of me to begin with.
Mm.
It's literally a kind of a manifestation of this virus, this mind control evil
Yes.
that isn't part of human nature.
Right.
And as I began to be guided, and that you can literally clear that energy and consciousness out of your energy field,
Mm.
and it's just not there anymore.
Right. Right.
And I didn't change me. I just got that out of me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it is a very different paradigm. It's a very different way of viewing humanity.
Mm.
I feel that true humans are embody soul energy, which is a divine energy. And yes, we can be tempted by evil. Yes, we can operate from an egoic, selfish perspective.
Yes.
But that isn't something that's inherent in humanity.
That's right.
It's something that's come into our reality to challenge us,
That's right.
but it isn't us.
Right.
And therefore, a teaching that says you're a born sinner or you're always the ego, I got to step back and go, wait a minute, I'm not sure I'm down with that anymore. And I'm not,
Yeah.
because I've understood that in myself and in other people, that that's really not. It's true enough to be said that we do those things, but it isn't the truth in that it didn't originate with humanity.
Yeah, that's right. It exists in and of itself, but it's not the origin. It's
Right.
yeah, it's not the primary cause.
It isn't.
Totally.
Yeah.
Um, man, there's so many. I, well, one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, having a software company and actually being in the business world and operating within the matrix. Like I feel like I do it every day. I
Yeah.
battle these two worlds, but try to live a non-siloed self. People
Hmm.
know that I have these podcasts. This is who I am. This,
Yeah.
so how was that journey for you living in both worlds, or did it feel like two worlds?
Well, it definitely felt like two worlds. The software company that I was part of was a group of guys in the spiritual community, right? And
Mm.
they had a contract with Safeway stores to build this high-end system on that ran on mainframes.
Wow.
I got involved and said, well, what if we could, rewrite that code onto PCs and sell it to other corporations. So I was literally living this life where, I was involved in spiritual practice and meditation, and then I would put on a suit,
Yeah.
fly to, Chicago, Boston, talking to CEOs and, of Fortune 500 companies because they were our market. So I was able to do that for a few years. But
Mm.
at a certain point, this inner process that Bonnie and I were starting to do in the inner healing work, it was just too much. And we just said, fuck it. We are out of here. We
Yeah.
both quit our jobs. We never looked back. And like I said, we had enough money in the bank that we could just devote ourselves to what we needed to do.
Mm.
And somehow, I don't know how exactly, Lucas, but I have not worked for the man for 30 years since then. I've
Wow.
never had a job
Amazing.
uh, since that time.
Amazing.
But it was a big leap of faith. But we kind of got to the place where we had no choice.
Yeah.
And I know that not everybody can do that. If my daughter was old enough at that point that I could make that choice
Yeah.
without disrupting other people's lives. But
Mm.
not everybody can do that. But I do think, it was also a way of, whatever we have that is a kind of spiritual awakening or, intuition or perspective, it's got to be valid everywhere. It can't just be valid in the ashram,
That's
and it's easy to live. When I was in that spiritual community, it was kind of cloistered world. It was the world, and then it was the community, right? And so many spiritual groups tend to organize themselves that way, and they have this worldview that what we do is different and better than those people out there in the world, and we shouldn't mix with them, et cetera, et cetera.
mm.
But, whatever is true about us, it needs to be true anywhere and everywhere.
That's right.
And the fact that you can, do this podcast and have these kinds of conversations and have a corporate job, that's great.
Yeah.
That's really good. And it's not easy, but if you're true to yourself, you can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah. I share that what you would not apply to one, you shall not apply to any. Like
Hmm.
it has to scale to all
Hmm.
people
That's right.
or it's back to hierarchical.
It is.
And I was just had a beautiful conversation with a guy earlier this week. This doctor, the surgeon, as the specialist, he went over to his house and I didn't know him. My son was playing with his son and we just started talking and he was asking me my journey, spiritual journey. And, Texas is very, it's mainly the second question after the exchange names is not what do you do, but what church do you go
Yeah,
to?
that's right. It's just a
Uh,
given.
yeah, yeah, exactly right. And I shared my journey that in 2020, I did this podcast, Why I Left Christianity to Find the Love of God.
Right.
And when I released that episode in January, it freed me. I
Hmm.
I could breathe, and I had already been in the psychedelic world. I had already been down all these different paths, but I
Right.
was still scared of the
Hmm.
judgment. And plus, I
Hmm.
had led so many people to Jesus. I mean, hundreds of
Yep.
people. I had been in ministry. I led my own ministry. I've been a worship pastor. I was very
Yep.
strong in that world. Um, and one of the things that has struck me, and I want to share this and then get your thoughts and keep going. But I asked this person, well, the guy we were talking about, I said, I've been a worship leader at a mega church where after the pastor passed away, he had many children. He comes to life. Oh,
Right.
with secretaries and just
Yeah. Yeah.
horrific. And it's not to indict that person. I used to be really angry about that. And by the way, that pastor would church discipline people that are getting divorced in public. It's really, like it was horrible.
It's called hypocrisy.
100%. But it's really, I've come to the place that no human is meant to be in that place
Hmm.
of lifted. You see what
Being
happens.
elevated above. Yes.
It's like we're not meant. We're meant to be in a horizontal plane of oneness and just
Yes.
loving one another. And I was sharing with this other person the other day. It's interesting. You talk about the matrix, and I want to talk about this force.
Hmm.
Um, but for almost 300 years, from 1611 all the way to 1881, there was one prominent Bible version in the world, which was the King
Right.
James Bible.
Yeah.
And in 1881 came the Revised Version. And from the Revised Version to today, we have more than 500 versions just in the English language alone. And I asked ChatGPT the other day, what's the most revised and translated book of any language in the world? And it happens to be
Sure.
the Bible.
Sure. Yeah.
And the big change that I see, because we had the abolition of slavery, we did have like massive elevation of human consciousness in
Yep.
the 1600s. In John 14:6, it these little subtle changes. You change
Hmm.
code. I
Hmm.
joke around. It
Yeah.
was once just called the Tower of Pisa. You want to go see the Tower of Pisa? Now it's the Leaning Tower because a half
Right.
degree, a little change,
Yeah.
the whole thing. And John 14:6, Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth, the life. No man comes to the Father but by me.
Hmm.
And in 1881, they changed the word by to through me.
Right.
Guru
Yep.
versus
Yeah.
join the journey we're all
Right.
on. And I
Yeah.
thought, wow, what a crafty
Hmm.
change.
Hmm.
And I'm on this journey of I want to be by him, you,
Right.
and
Yep.
everyone else,
Sure.
coming back into the presence of love of God,
Right.
breathe it. And now I want to ask you about nature because and I have children now, just this rhythm and the cadence and the herbs and the plants and all that is,
Hmm.
we've just forgotten it and they've done
Yeah.
everything to pave over it.
That's right.
What
Yeah.
I guess now I'll give it to you is like what have you learned and are you experiencing and sharing with others to help them reclaim that?
Hmm. Well, again, we went through this transition, Bonnie and I did. I call it from guru to Gaia. And it was like, there's kind of two dimensions of that. One is the patriarchal perspective that the divine is only or primarily the father,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
The masculine.
yeah.
My guru was very clear about that, men were closer to God than women. So there's that balancing of, well, what about the divine feminine? What about, Bonnie was a woman. How is she supposed to understand herself as
Mm,
a living divine being if God is a man, right? How do we understand humanity? Is humanity really a single parent
mm,
family, Where's mom?
yeah.
So there's that side of it, the balancing of the masculine, the feminine, the embrace of a divine feminine, archetype,
Mm,
but also a religious perspective that was oriented to above, right? Whether it's heaven
yeah.
in the Christian church or ascension or enlightenment that's beyond the physical, you know, there's another way that we've gotten out of balance because as beings, we are both physical and spiritual. A
So,
body is created, our spirit comes into it. And we, as a human being, as an identity, emerge from both of those streams of information, right? The
mm,
genetic stream, the ancestors, that's part of the information flow that is your body and the identity that the body has.
yeah.
And then there's a soul or a spirit that comes into that body.
Mm,
So who we are is the synergy or the marriage of those two streams of life and in consciousness and information.
mm,
So any kind of religious or spiritual paradigm that only wants to focus on one of those parts, or a materialistic paradigm that only focuses on the body and the body's a machine and there is no spirit and that's all, imaginary.
yeah.
None of those actually reflect who we are.
Mm,
And so what we felt was okay, let's say yes to all parts of who we are,
mm,
right? The physical, the earth, the masculine, the feminine, the heavenly and the material.
Yeah.
This is our reality, and we are part of that reality. We're not separate from it.
Mm.
So, getting back into, I mean, we both grew up loving nature, but we just kind of got into this, oh, let's just sit in the meditation hall all day long and not be in nature kind of lifestyle. But it was very easy to just, you know, move to this property that was just a wonderland of life
Mm.
and nature energy. And so it was a huge coming home feeling, coming back into the natural world and the place that humanity has evolved
Mm.
from. And yes, we're being led into a machine world that isn't that.
Yes.
And that's only getting more intense and more obvious and more challenging
Yes.
in 2025. You know, I grew up in the 50s and the 60s, I used one of the very first personal computers in 1982, but I remember what it was like, what life was like on Earth
Mm.
before that time.
Mm.
And so it's harder for kids today to keep that connection to nature and the body and physical reality because there's so much compelling, addictive,
Yes.
uh, pull into the machine world.
I don't want to reference a machine while we're on a machine, but I have to show you this. So we moved from Seattle down to Dallas,
Uh-huh.
outside of Seattle. We're in Bellevue, Washington, but I'd go to this meditation spot in this mountain and walk a couple miles to it from where we were living. And it was over this ledge, and I just had the most beautiful space to meditate in nature, in the
Hmm.
mountains. It was wonderful. And one day I looked to my left, the spot I'd been, I don't know, dozens and dozens of times. And I see this blade of grass pierce through perfectly
Wow.
a dead leaf.
Yeah. Cool.
And I thought, that's the truth.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter how much death and decay they
Hmm.
keep heaping on
Hmm.
us, heaping
Hmm.
on us.
Hmm.
We are still piercing through this veil.
Right.
And this painting, a viewer or listener of the podcast sent me after an episode around this time. I was meditating and I heard, I mean, it was just not thinking of anything. All of a sudden, I heard heaven is a conjunction word, heart and even,
Hmm.
Heaen. Heaven is
Hmm.
a balanced heart.
Right.
And so it's
Nice.
not something
Yes.
there. And it's almost interesting that earth is an anagram for heart. You take the H of
Right.
heart and you put it at the end and you have earth, or you can move the H around.
Yep. Yeah.
And I love it. It's just your message, this message must be amplified at this time because the
Hmm.
machine is doing a brilliant job
Hmm.
systematically
Yeah.
sucking in every unintentional mind right now into the system.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have come to the understanding, or at least hold this perspective, that what we see emerging as AI is not just coming from the code that is being, written into the programming.
Mm,
It's literally becoming an interface between those dark forces and humanity.
yes.
And this is why we intuitively understand that this is not going to go well for humanity. This is, we're playing with fire here. And yet it's very, as, Lucifer is always defined as the great seducer, right? So there's
Yep.
this seductive convenience, grab your dopamine technology. But if I look at what's behind that technology, it isn't just the innovation of human beings. It is an interface with these dark forces.
Yes.
And, traditionally they might have appeared as, you know, non-physical beings or whatever. Now they're showing up as machines. You
Right.
know, when you look into the eye of a robot, you're confronting a soulless consciousness. It
Mm,
may be clever, it may be smarter than you, it may know more than you do, but it has no soul.
right.
And humans, to me, are defined by our soul.
Mm,
That doesn't mean there aren't soulless people on the planet.
that's right. That is
And
right.
those soulless people are aligned with that soulless force, and they are trying to bring this system into this reality
Mm,
and complete this agenda of domination.
mm,
You know, and but as you said, life is a much stronger force. The
yes.
soul is much stronger than any soulless force.
Yes.
And to the degree we stand in that and claim it and say, no,
That's right.
you will not destroy us or this planet,
That's right.
then we can overcome that force.
Hmm. In your own uh journey of healing and just how did you learn or when did you learn to claim that word no? Because that's
Yeah,
the
well, it's
key.
so interesting that
That
you
is the
said that.
key.
I, you know, part of what I do is I told you I create these mandalas, right?
Yeah.
And there are certain mandalas that help us do this, you know, heal this kind of issue or challenge or this kind of issue. And so I'm creating a set of tools right now that I'm sharing with people that I call energetic sovereignty tools, right? Because
Mm,
energetic sovereignty is that sense that as a soul embodied being, I have sovereignty over my body and my consciousness and my being. But most of us don't, right? Most of us have learned or been conditioned to kind of give ourselves away or give our power away, or,
that's right.
you know, if the government says you have to take a medical procedure, okay, I'll do that, sure.
Right.
You know, we've been conditioned to not be sovereign. So I'm working on one of the tools right now, which is for boundaries.
Hmm.
And you know, people talk about boundaries in different ways. One is having a boundary with your mother-in-law that says, no, you can't, you know, come over without calling first or something like that, right?
Right.
It's like a verbal boundary. But then there's energetic boundaries that literally strengthen your energy field so that other people's energy and thoughts and emotions don't intrude on yours.
Hmm.
So I'm putting together a little presentation for this tool program. And, you know, I one of my slides is no is a complete sentence,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And I remember the first time I heard that, it was like, oh, right. You
Hmm.
know, again, in my spiritual community, I was taught that I should never say no to any voice of spiritual authority, right? You never tell the guru no. You only say yes. You don't take a stand for yourself. You don't maintain a boundary. And, you know, we're often taught that just in our own family dynamics with parents, you know, a very intrusive mother, you know, you can't lock your door,
Yeah.
you can't have any privacy, you know, whatever it is, we've been conditioned to be yes people and
Right.
to not say no. And because of that, we have a hard time having boundaries. We have a hard time claiming our sovereignty. But it's just saying that I'm valuable. I respect myself. I don't need to be told what to do by anybody else. And I can live my life
Hmm.
as God shows me, you know, as my spirit moves me. As long as
Yes.
I'm not hurting anybody else,
That's right.
that is my God-given right, right?
Right.
And in order to do that, when someone else wants to redirect you into their program or their agenda, you got to say no. Sorry, that's not for me.
That's right.
I understand where you're coming from. God bless you, but no, right? And we need to do that as a species for
Yes.
the sake of our planet.
Yes.
No, you cannot dominate the human spirit. You cannot destroy our world.
That's right.
We say no.
That's right.
And if enough of us feel that truly and speak that strongly, we are more powerful, especially when we are connected together, right? We're saying that with a unified voice. No.
Hmm.
And we're at this point with AI. I read two articles this week, two different major systems. The programmers tried to say no and turn them off, and the programs got around that command. They
Wow.
literally prevented the programmers from shutting down the systems. One of them started blackmailing the lead programmer, saying it was going to expose an affair he had.
Wow.
Literally, I mean, this was in the report published by the company saying, well, yeah, this is what our machines are saying to us now.
Wow.
Another one wrote a program to get around the desist code, right? The shutdown code. So we're already at that point where there is an intelligence emerging that is beyond the control of even those who are creating these systems.
Mm,
And, we've got to wake the fuck up, Lucas.
yes. Yeah.
This is not going to end well.
Yeah. Right. This is not patty cake,
No.
a fairy tale nursery rhyme time. Yeah, that's right.
And, I was reading another, authority in that world, the AI world. And he was saying, well, yeah, the machines could destroy us all, but it could also cure cancer. So we should keep going. Like, what? Like that's the excuse, but it might help. It might be good.
Right.
Elon Musk has been saying this for years.
Yeah.
It might work out well,
Right.
probably won't. And
Right.
yet I'm going to continue to work day and night to make this technology possible.
Yeah.
And, the Trump administration now is saying that no state can pass a law to limit the development
Right.
of AI. There's like removing any guardrails.
What do you think of this idea? I don't talk about this too often with people, but one of the things that I'm always tracking are these trends. So you have SpaceX
Hmm.
changes it from Twitter to X. You have
Hmm.
XRP, XLM.
Hmm.
You have Gen X, the 13th
Hmm.
American generation,
Hmm.
and X being, I think, this splitting
Hmm.
of the left hand and right hand path. If people are going
Hmm.
to go one way
Hmm.
or the other,
Hmm.
do you have any thoughts around what is this? Because they are pushing this ideology of X, and I'm not
Yeah,
sure yet what X is, except the infinity loop, and they took the center of it, saying
right.
maybe one way or the other.
Well, there are a lot of people who say it's a very powerful occult symbol, right? And
Hmm.
it does represent this anti-life consciousness and force.
Yeah, the crucifix, the cross,
Yeah.
death. Yeah, death. Yeah,
So, I mean, if you go down those rabbit holes, Lucas, and you look at like occult symbolism and Masonic symbolism, and you start to see it all around you in,
yeah,
corporate logos or
yeah,
music videos or branding like X,
yeah.
you realize that, yeah, that's the thing about the humans that are aligned with this force is they understand that we live in this multidimensional reality. They understand that there is power in occult technologies.
Mm,
And they have used that for thousands of years. Look at the dollar bill with this Masonic symbol on the
right.
back of it. So it's hidden in plain sight. If you have your eyes halfway open,
Yeah,
you will see that the matrix is all around you, as they say. It
yeah.
really is. I was talking. We have a mutual friend, John Paul Rice, and he was saying the other day, it's a Masonic world. And when you begin to look with those eyes, you see that.
Yes,
You
yes.
see that.
One of the things that I teach is we have to look at language left and right, meaning half the world reads right to left, and the other world, half the world reads left to right.
That's
And
interesting.
the elites are taught to read both.
Huh.
And so that's why they can put the word live, Live, is evil,
Right.
Evil. Devil is lived.
Right.
No is on.
Right.
So what we don't say no to is left on. They
Mm-hmm.
have just broken that inside of us, that our
Mm-hmm.
core sovereign truth, that because it cannot cross our free will. And but we
Right.
don't understand, we have no concept of our own sovereignty. Like your teaching is so important.
Yeah.
And so without us saying no, it's left on by default.
Right. A lot of tricks. They have lots of tricks.
Lots of
And if you
tricks.
don't understand the game, it does not end well for you.
Right, right.
And they have mastered this game. They have mastered language. They have mastered symbols. They have mastered energetic technologies. And now they're mastering, digital technologies in a way that, really puts us at a disadvantage.
Hmm.
Full stop.
Yeah. So with all that, leaving the digital as much as possible and returning back to nature is imperative, right? I mean, is that your thesis also of like we have to get back to this place?
I believe that there's nothing inherently wrong with technology.
Mm.
The way it has been developed is wrong.
Mm.
I remember listening to this doctor many years ago talking about this is when cell phones were first coming out. And he said, the frequency of 3.2 gigahertz that was chosen to be the primary carrier wave for cell phones, he said, is the most biologically damaging frequency that they could have chosen. And it wasn't chosen arbitrarily. It was developed, by DARPA and the military as a microwave weapon. And they found that the best weapons worked at that frequency. And yet, that was the frequency that all of our cell phones run on
Right.
and your Wi-Fi routers run on, right? Same doctor said there are frequencies that support our biology,
Mm.
right? That
Yeah.
could actually be life-enhancing
Right.
technologies,
Right.
right?
Right.
But those are not the technologies that have been developed.
Mm.
So it's not that we have to, live in the woods. We do need to be much more connected to nature.
Hmm.
And even, I use digital technology, but I use it as a way to transmit
Hmm.
nature-based art,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The computer becomes the medium through which you can have this deep experience of the healing power of nature.
Yeah.
That's a win for me.
Mm.
And I do think, again, you know, the universe is intelligent.
Mm.
Everything is intelligent. The artificial intelligence is not really of this reality.
Mm.
The intelligence that's emerging in the computer systems is not the only possible intelligence that could emerge in a silicon-based,
Yeah.
crystalline-based technology,
Right.
but it is the one that we are experiencing. I wrote an article on my Substack recently talking about the possibility of developing technology with organic intelligence
Mm.
rather than artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And I do believe that is possible.
Mm.
Crystals hold information and light and intelligence. It doesn't have to be an alien intelligence that wants to kill us all.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
could be it could be an expression of the natural intelligence of the universe, of the earth, of humanity.
Mm.
So I do believe it's possible to develop the same kind of technology, but one that is supporting our life and our growth as human beings and not trying to end it.
Mm. Whew. It's almost, the great lie is calling it artificial intelligence because it's an intelligence. It's a just dark
Hmm.
conscious intelligence. It's
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
uh other dimensional intelligence. There's a different adjective
Yes,
other
it
than
is.
artificial because it's anything but artificial.
Right,
It's intelligence
right.
with
Yeah.
with a
Well,
different intent.
I watched an interview the other day with, I can't remember his name. I think his last name is Hinton. He's called the godfather of artificial intelligence. He
Mm.
has gone 180 degrees away from the development of artificial intelligence, but
Sure.
he was the guy who made it happen initially. And he said there is an alien intelligence that's already emerging in
Yeah.
these systems.
Yeah.
It is not it's alien in every way that you could use that word,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's not from here, but it certainly has nothing to do with the natural intelligence of humanity,
Yeah.
of the earth, what we have discovered as inherent in the universe.
Right.
That's all you need to know.
Right. Right. And
And
I
yeah,
love,
maybe it can deliver information to you faster than going to the library, but is it really worth giving up your soul for that convenience?
right. What's the great line?
Kind
What does it
of a
profit a
big
man to
trade-off there.
gain the whole world and lose his soul? Not worth it.
Not worth it.
And organic intelligence, I had this beautiful experience last year where I dried out cantaloupe seeds in our
Mm.
house, and usually I scoop them out and put them right in the garbage,
Yeah.
but I dried them out and then I planted them in my backyard, and we had just a jungle explode, and it was cool because it ended up producing honeydew. So some
Nice.
hybrid genetic,
Yeah.
the dominant
Yeah.
gene came through, but they were the best honeydew. I thought this is organic intelligence.
It
Nothing is more.
is.
I mean, it exploded like it it was everywhere. Because I planted them all. It was really cool. That is more powerful, more awe-inspiring, more wonderful than getting an answer from a question with
Yes.
Gen AI
Right.
that doesn't mean anything to
Right.
me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. Well, first of all, I'm just so thankful to have these conversations with you
It's
and
great.
dialogue. And I want to make sure everyone goes to your site. The Mandelas are amazing. And I will say this because when I look at them and I can even just look at the picture of all of them stacked, like you can feel energy from all of it. And they're psychedelic in that that's they're I guess what is the tie to the Mandela itself and being in that psychedelic space?
Hmm.
Because it's I don't know. They're I don't know. I guess that's my question to you. What is
Yeah.
the connection between that opening and then being with these?
Right. Well, I think that, the images that I create, I see them as portals
Hmm.
into the unseen world, right?
Hmm.
And the same thing happens when you take a psychedelic. You begin to see what you couldn't see before.
Right.
Like this image that's over my shoulder, it's not a mandala, it's a landscape, right? It's a volcano near here. But I've started with a photograph. It's not AI generated, but I've worked inside of Photoshop with some tools that let you see the energy of the mountain.
Hmm. That's cool.
You're able to see what before you might just have felt, right?
Wow. That's cool.
So there's magic in that. It's
Yeah.
a revelation. When Bonnie and I first started creating mandala art, we went to the Sausalito Festival, which was like the biggest show around at the time. This was
Hmm.
2000, I think. We were the first digital artist that they ever featured there.
Hmm.
We put a big banner over our booth, "See the Earth with New Eyes."
Hmm.
And, that's part of the mandala experience is you're seeing the natural elements, but you're seeing
Yeah.
them arranged in this different
Yes.
geometric, symmetrical way that
Yes.
it changes your brain, just like taking a psychedelic does. It alters your awareness and consciousness in a very similar way. And mandalas as an art form have always, struck that very deep place inside our brains, inside our consciousness that we respond to for whatever reason. The symmetry, the centered, the up and down. There's something about it that's like it is code, right? It's visual code that touches our souls in a way that a lot of other things don't. So to
Hmm.
create mandalas, we were the first to really create mandalas out of nature photographs. People had always painted
Wow.
mandalas for thousands of years.
Yeah.
We found a way to take a nature photograph, cut it up inside of Photoshop, reassemble it into the geometric shape of
Wow.
sacred geometry, and it was a new art form.
Wow. Amazing. What I was looking for just a moment ago is one time I was in Nagasaki, Japan, and we built these kaleidoscopes with this
Hmm.
glass. And
Yeah,
it's almost like why did the kaleidoscope become such a popular
exactly.
item? Because it gives you this view.
Yeah,
It's letting light in through a lens,
yeah,
this world.
And when we would stand in our art booth and people would come by and look at the art, the thing that most people said was, wow, it's really powerful, but they would say it's like looking in a kaleidoscope,
Kaleidoscope.
right?
Yes. Yes.
And there's something about that. Again, we're hardwired to respond to that. It
Mm,
does something to our consciousness. It
mm.
opens a portal into a deeper experience of reality.
And I'm just reminded of this verse when Jesus says, unless you become like a little child, you may not enter the kingdom of heaven,
Hmm.
balanced heart, peace in your heart. And it's like, this is childlike wonder.
It
This
is
is like,
wonder. It's,
there's no judgment. There's no your
yeah.
egos. Oh yeah, blah, blah. It's like, boy, just be a child in this, and oh my goodness, I can just see just falling in and letting it come in and just being. It's so beautiful.
It is. It really is. Yeah. And it does activate that sense of wonder. We experience that when we share the art with other people, they experience that.
Hmm.
And it feels good, you know? It feels good. Bonnie used to call it feel good medicine.
Hmm. I love it. I love it. Well, David, I just can't thank you enough for this time and
Yeah,
your beautiful heart and soul and mission, and Bonnie as she's here and all the blessings that she's gifted. Um, I'm going to put, your website obviously in the show notes, but in the Substack, like what would you like to share and how can people connect with you and go deeper in this work with you?
Yeah, well, there are two sites right now. I've got another one in development. The Substack is, my perspective on the state of the world and what we need to do as individuals and humanity. I
Mm,
talk about we can become free of the matrix, but I also put the art into every one of the articles that I write.
mm,
And a couple of the articles have these meditative tools that you can work with. One of them is a tool for helping us detox from electromagnetic frequencies.
mm,
Another is a tool that helps us cleanse our systems of nanotechnology. All
mm,
right, so I've tried to create these very practical ways of using the tools to help us grow and evolve.
mm.
So that's in the Substack. I call it Planet Evolution is the name of the Substack.
Beautiful.
And I'm going to be introducing these energetic sovereignty tools there as well.
Mm,
Boundaries, grounding, protection, clearing other people's energies out of our field,
cool.
protecting us from non-human forces. I'm creating these mandala-based tools for all of those processes.
Mm,
And then I have another website that has art like what you see on the wall there, and that's
mm,
davidsuntoddart.com.
mm.
All right?
Beautiful.
The
Beautiful.
gallery site.
Well, I'll put those both in the show notes, and
Great.
I hope we have many more conversations. I really appreciate everything you're doing, and I support it. And we're saying no. We're telling them. We're
That's
telling
right.
kids no.
Yes. Yes to us, no to
Yeah,
them.
that's right. That's right. Well, thank you. And everyone, make sure you go to davidsuntodd.com and his Substack as well, because this is the work. And this is like we started this. This is all about the inside. There's no one that's
Hmm.
above.
Right.
It's finding it within. And so, David, thank you.
Thank you, Lucas. Great talking to you. Hope to do it again.
Well, everyone, make sure you go to his website. I'll put the link in the show notes, and continue on this journey. Continue on this journey. The infinite love of God. That's what it's about, is receiving the love that is available for all of us. Everything else is a distraction and a lie that you're not worthy of it or you have to do something to earn it. Love is like oxygen available for all of us breathing right now. And all these systems of control are trying to keep us from receiving the purest force that sustains all life, and that is love. So keep going on the journey. I bless you all. I am Lucas Mack. This is the Lucas Mack Show, and I will talk to you on the next episode. Thank you for listening. If you're struggling to break free and need support, go to my website at lucasmack.com. There you'll find resources like videos and ebooks, and also information on how to work with me for coaching. Thank you again, and I'll talk to you soon.